So today we're going to talk about something that's quite interesting, and that is map rotation, because yesterday we got a kind of first teaser into what might be the 8th map in the pool, this poster of a Portuguese aquarium or something aquatic at the very least. And with an 8th map, that might mean that some form of map rotation is coming. Now, what do I mean by map rotation? Well, basically it means taking one of the existing maps and, putting it into a form of inactivity. We don't exactly know what that will be, and that's a big point that Riot hasn't mentioned anything yet, so this whole video really could be pointless because they might not do map rotation. But let me explain why they might do it, why other games have decided to do it as well. And the basics of it come from Valorant is obviously a tactical shooter, and so imagine if you're a new player and there's 12 maps in the pool or something, quite large, and you didn't have any map rotation and there was just 12 maps to potentially learn. For a new player, that's going to be very overwhelming, considering when you play Valorant, you need a certain level of good map knowledge. Sure, for experienced players, it would be fine because you're just only adding one new map each time to what you already know. But for a newer player, learning, 10, 12 maps would become very, very overwhelming, and it would take a long time for them to get a good grasp of each map. I mean, I remember when I first started playing this game, I was already getting a bit confused at the start of, like, what exactly is each map? Some of them kind of have the same color scheme maybe at points, so it's like a bit confusing. And so I think for, newer players, you don't want to overwhelm them with just a ton of different maps that they will need to learn pretty well to get good at the game. Another reason why this might happen is for competitive play as well, because 7 maps just fits very well with how a pick and ban system works, whether you're playing a best of 3 or a best of 5, right? In a best of 3, each team, as you can see here, one team bans a map, the other team bans a map, then you both pick a map, then you ban 2 other maps as well, and then one is just left standing for that kind of third neutral map. That's how it works currently in competitive Valorant, and obviously for a best of 5, you both just ban a map, and then the other 5 get picked in order in terms of what you want to play. So it works very well to have 7 maps, whereas if you imagine that there was an 8th map as well, potentially, this first part would probably all still happen, but then we would be left with 2 maps where, maybe the Riot team would have to pick what map then goes in. And of course, for pro teams as well, this creates a bit of a problem in terms of they have to learn another map as well and how to play it and what strats they want to do on that map. That becomes a whole ton extra work for them to do. And obviously when you get new players in, like, you have to teach them everything about all your different maps, so adding another map would just be kind of a problem there as well. And so for the competitive scene as well, it makes sense to rotate a map. So how will Valorant go about rotating their maps? Well, this we don't quite know yet. They might not do it at all, but they could do it in a way where, it gets rotated for everyone. They could do it in a way where it only gets rotated for competitive. It could rotate every act. It could rotate every episode. It could do, whenever Riot feels like it, they could use rotation to work on maps like they did for Icebox when they did the redesign. There's a lot of different things that we don't quite have the answer to yet that maybe we will be getting the answer to in a couple of days. But I wanted to get ahead of the curve and think about, okay, let's assume a map rotation does happen for everyone, right? One map just goes into kind of a different pool. Maybe you can play it in certain game modes like Spike Rush or whatever, but not in terms of competitive play on ranked queue or obviously for the pro scene either. Let's assume that that happens and one map just goes. What map would it be? Well, let's do a process of elimination, and we'll start with the easy one, shall we? Fracture and Breeze, because to me, Fracture and Breeze obviously being the newest 2 maps, I feel like it's unlikely they would probably pick either of these maps to be rotated out. Not just because they're new, and I know that a lot of people don't like these maps. A lot of casual players in particular don't like these maps. They think that they're bad maps or whatever. But I can assure you that I would be very surprised if Riot got rid of these maps. I think one of the reasons that a lot of people don't like these maps is because they are different. But I think Riot sees that as a very positive point, because maps being different means that different strategies will work on that map than other ones. And that means that different agents will see more play on certain maps. And that is overall good if, agents have their own maps that they can thrive on. It means that every agent hopefully will, find their place within a meta and have their maps that they're good on. I think that that is what Riot wants, and I think you can understand why that would be a good idea, not to just have the same agents being picked all the time on every single map. And by having different maps that do different things, like Breeze is obviously a very big map, Fracture is a very weird map in terms of the way it's laid out with the defenders spawn in the middle of the map. I think that allows them to, have different agents be good on this map, and it allows for, a variety of gameplay as well. But those two are perhaps the obvious ones, and so now we come to the other 5. And really, of these middle 5 here on this list, I do think that there is a case to be made for all of these maps being the one that might rotate out. But let's go from what I probably would least expect to perhaps what I would most expect. And we'll start with Ascent. Ascent is obviously a map that I think a lot of people like. I think unlike Fracture and Breeze, Ascent is a very normal map. In fact, if you had to describe every single map with only one word, my word for Ascent might just be normal, because I think that that's why a lot of people enjoy this map. It kind of just feels like a tac shooter map. It just, you know, it has a very standard layout to it. I think that's why a lot of people kind of like it, particularly if you're coming from other tac shooters. That just, yeah, it feels like a map that you might have played on before. And so a lot of people like Ascent. You know, it wasn't part of the original 3 maps either, a part of the beta. To be fair, Riot might see that Ascent was an original map for when the game fully released, because it came out in 1.0. So maybe they will see it as part of the original core that could be rotated out. But really, there's only one real reason that I could see maybe Ascent being the choice. And that one reason, the only real reason I could find for it being Ascent, actually comes from the map pages on the Valorant website. Because if you go here, you see that Fracture is number 1, you know, obviously the newest map. Breeze is number 2, the second newest map. Icebox is number 3, the third newest map. But then we have Bind, then Haven, then Split, and then last but not least, Ascent. Now that's not in alphabetical order. Ascent obviously didn't come out as early as those other maps that were part of the beta, as I mentioned. You know, they would probably say that Ascent came out at the same time, because really the game came out with Ascent, so, you know, maybe they would see it as that. But why is Ascent number 7? I don't know. Maybe this is the clue, and if it is, then I am an absolute genius. But I don't really think that that is the case. I think it just happens to be number 7 on this page. But yeah, maybe this is them secretly telling us that Ascent will be rotated out. But yes, I highly doubt really that it's going to be Ascent. So let's come to another one that I would really not suspect them to rotate out, and that is Haven. Haven obviously has the uniqueness of being a 3-site map. I mean, maybe the new map will be a 3-site map, in which case maybe that increases the chance that Haven will be rotated out. But assuming that it's not, I think that Haven still has its unique place. I think a lot of people like Haven, even if it's not their favorite map. I think it's a map that a lot of people still like, you know, would be towards the top overall for most people of the map pool. So, you know, you've got a map that people like that hasn't really needed much change at all either. It just seems like a well-designed map on the whole. It just works, right? There's a variety of agents that can work on this map. There's a lot of different strategies I've seen played on this map. It just seems like a pretty well-balanced map on the whole, and so I'd be surprised if they got rid of Haven. But now let's come to the big 3, and I think the 3 most likely maps to potentially be rotated out, and they are Bind, Split, and Icebox. Bind and Split obviously are part of the initial 3, so they've been in the game the longest alongside Haven, and so you might expect that they would be rotated out. But we'll start with Bind, and Bind as a map. What it has going for it, I think, is that it is very unique. There is no mid in Bind, right? There is no place to go play mid. There's just 2 lanes to go to B, 2 lanes to go to A, and that does make it a very unique map. The teleporters as well are a very unique thing as well in terms of like a map gimmick. The teleporters are kind of, you know, one in their own, and so Bind definitely has some things going for it that make it unique. However, I think that there are some things that, if I'm getting into like Riot's head in terms of like design meetings and things like that, I can imagine that they perhaps would have hoped that more play would be used with the teleporters, right? The teleporters right now, for the most part, are just used as kind of quick rotation tools and whatnot. And I'm sure when they designed this map, they probably hoped that they would be used, you know, in a bit more of a creative way. I'm sure that they were very excited to see what pro players would do with the teleporters, right? And we do see some things like, you know, maybe a sky flash comes through the teleporter here and you get a shower crunch down here like this. That does happen in pro games, don't get me wrong, but I'm sure that they would ideally, or at least if I was the designer of this map, I would probably be thinking, these teleporters are really cool. I wish people would do more cool stuff with them. And so what they might, I can picture a world where they get rid of Bind and they redesign the map slightly, right? It could be small things like moving this teleporter to like here instead. So it's kind of more in the middle of the attackers and the defenders, or you know, bringing this part of the teleporter over here instead, or bringing this one here instead, you know, just like more in the middle between them. I can see things like that happening so that more kind of strategies can come about from the teleporters on the whole, and so that might mitigate this lack of this lack of mid, which I think some people might find a bit frustrating. And now let's come to Split. And Split, I think I would have to say, is a bit of a Marmite map. I think some people really like Split, some people really don't like Split. And I think it has to do with a couple things. One is that attacking Split can be pretty hard. And I think the reason is that, just full like 5 rushing either B or A is quite difficult. I mean, B is just kind of a death trap anytime that you do that. A lot of the time, this B main area is just a death trap a lot of the time. And A, even if you do get onto site on A, let's say, all your team comes around this way, the problem that you then face is if you don't take heaven control, it becomes very easy for the defenders to kind of attack you on the retake, right? Because they're going to have control of this, they're going to have control of that, and they can probably do this as well. And so you're getting attacked from sort of 3 ways, and you're going to get pinned in onto the site. And so attacking on this map can be quite hard if you don't control mid. And so that can make the map perhaps sometimes a bit predictable, and a lot of teams can struggle in terms of their attacking side on Split, both in terms of ranked games and also pro play as well. A lot of pro teams struggle with attacking on Split. And so that can make the map perhaps a bit boring. It's a very defender-sided map, or perhaps the most defender-sided map. And maybe that's something that if this map did rotate out of the pool for a bit, that Riot would want to look at, right? That they would want to change in some way. Also, Split kind of now doesn't have a gimmick, right? Like other maps have ropes as well, and there isn't really much else to Split either in that sense. So maybe Split will be a map that does rotate out. As I said, it does have some things going for it. I think it's a very interesting map to watch in terms of pro play, because so many different agents do get played, and there is a ton of different agents that can find viability on this map. But there definitely is some issues that I could see Riot wanting to resolve in some way, maybe making it a bit easier for attackers to go through those B main and A main choke points, something like that. I could definitely see that happening if they did want to rotate Split. And then last but not least, well, maybe least as well, we come to Icebox, because I think this is the real black sheep of Valorant maps, and let me explain why. I think the intention behind all of the other maps actually in Valorant has been fulfilled to a decent level, right? You might not like some of the intentions, like you might not like that Breeze has really long ranged fights or whatever, but that is what the map is designed to do. So you might not like it, but it fulfills the intention of what it's trying to do. Whereas Icebox, I think it does fulfill it to a certain extent with the verticality and whatnot. I think that was a kind of main goal of Icebox. But the map just doesn't really work. Even after the changes that came in, I think a lot of people, didn't really know what will the changes do, right? But it turns out they didn't really change that much. The same strategies are still coming in, and I think that what the intention behind those changes that they made on Icebox was so that the map wouldn't play out the same, but it ended up exactly the same. Because what you'll see commonly on Icebox, for instance, is 4 or 5 people will group up B and they'll go B, or 4 or 5 people will group up A and they'll go A. And that is pretty much the attacking strategy for a lot of pro teams and in ranked games as well. That is pretty much all it is, right? For instance, on B, you get the Sage Wall here, you plant on the narrowest sliver that you can on this B site. On A, a common wall you'll see is this one here, and you plant again in the narrowest little bit that you can. That is a common strategy on Icebox, and it's not fun to watch. It's not really that fun to play, just getting the spike down as soon as you can, and then just, playing post plant, for the entire game. That is pretty much all this map has become. Mid pretty much doesn't exist in this map for the most part. If you've watched my VOD reviews on Icebox, you'll know that anytime I see a team, go for mid splits, I'm like, why? You're just throwing away around a lot of the time because they don't work. There's too many angles to check, right? I mean, once you've actually, like, say you got a Viper Orb in here, and once you actually come towards mid, there's just there's just too many angles, right? On different elevations, you have to look different ways. It's not going to work. You have to guess, basically. You have to guess that you're looking at the right angle a lot of the time when you do these mid splits, and the success rate is super low for mid splits on Icebox, and that's why a lot of teams just don't try them full stop. And so, yeah, Icebox as a map, I think, just has a lot of problems. I think it would really benefit from being the map that rotated out, where they could take a look at a lot of things on this map, right? They could completely redesign mid, for instance. That would be a start. They could make it easier so that defenders can actually hold on to the A site, because that's something that is nearly impossible a lot of the time. You'll see a lot of, teams just play for complete retake on A because it's just so hard to actually hold and fight with a a lot of the time, and it's almost impossible to stop the attackers from coming past this area. They are going to get in here, and it's just a matter of, winning those close-up gunfights at that point. So Icebox has a lot of problems, I think, and I think if any map was going to rotate, I personally would pick Icebox, but I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts in the comments down below. If there was going to be rotation, how would you like to see rotation implemented? What map would you like to see be the first to rotate out? Do you think we need rotation at all? I'd be very interested in what you're having to say in the comments down below, so let me know. And with that, have a really nice day.